On today's episode, we are speaking to Limoness, better known as LS Digi, one of London's top Digi-Techs. We're going to talk about his role, what a Digi-Tech adds to a shoot, and how he's had to create new methods due to the pandemic. It's a fascinating chat, which does get a bit techie, but, it's kind of par for the course, so stick with it, get yourself some sort of drink, and enjoy it.
Morning, Tom. How are you doing?
Morning. I'm doing all right. It is, in fact, the afternoon, but for the sake of this link, we will...
creating an illusion.
Sorry, it's 8 a.m. and we've been recording. We've been recording this podcast for the past 2.5 hours,
and we are going to bring you some quality photography wittering.
Yes, thank you, DC. I am going to maybe put some birdsong in this and really kind of hum up the illusion that we are at 8 a.m. So enjoy your coffee. I'm sure everyone else is listening to this at 8 a.m. as well. So it's almost like it's happening in real time.
Indeed. And we're going to ignore the fact that we still don't, well, by the time this goes out, we'll possibly know who the next president of the US is. We'll know how well Lockdown 2 is going. Lockdown 2. It sounds like a sequel.
It's like the world's worst sequel to the world's worst film in the first place. Lockdown 2. This time it's personal.
The Reckoning. You've got a good movie voice, actually.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm amazed where the accent comes from.
I know.
It's like you've got the same voice coach as Liam Neeson.
Yeah. I don't know who you are. But no, let's not go in on that. That's a very, very deep cavern if we're starting to talk about Liam Neeson. So, we have got some good news, haven't we, from the APA and the AOP, RE Lockdown 2.
Yeah.
We are able to keep shooting.
Oh, I thought you were going to say it's all over. We've survived.
Unfortunately, Greg, we are at the beginning of this. I don't know if you saw yesterday, but the Chancellor, for example, said that this lockdown is going to be over by the 2nd of December. But yet the furlough scheme has been extended to the end of March. Now, I'm no genius. We all know that now. but I do feel like maybe they might be gearing up for a string of lockdowns.
Yes.
So
possibly a minor little, you can all come out of lockdown for Christmas, and then everyone goes around the country, spreads it all around even more, and they go, right, back in lockdown.
I do think that is what's going to happen. I think Lockdown 2, currently, this time it's personal, or Lockdown 2 Electric Avenue, that's also my favorite thing. My wife didn't let me put that in a newsletter the other day, which I think is probably quite wise.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe. I did see, I got an email the other day saying, I hope you're staying positive and testing negative.
Oh, genius.
And I thought, that's good. Insensitive.
So you're saying this is going to become a trilogy?
No, I think this is more. I think this is going to be like the Star Wars films where they just keep going and going and going.
Or the Fast and Furious.
Yes. Lockdown 372. Yeah. I do feel like this is Lockdown 2 is going to be a gentle lockdown. Then we're going to have Christmas, and then they are going to lock us properly down in January. And I feel like we're going to start getting out of this in kind of February, March, because obviously there have been, what I've learned with this government is you kind of have to look not at the announcement, but what people don't agree with the few days after the announcement. For example, there was a minister who came out and said, I'm not going to rule out that there might be 3 lockdowns. And you go, well, so that means there's going to be 3 lockdowns, does it?
So, I mean, obviously, I feel like this one shoots, as you said, the APA and the AOP have come out to say that, the guidelines state that productions can still go ahead.
Correct.
Feels like people are a little bit more kind of clued up now with what's cool and what's not cool on shoots, and what's possible and what's not possible, and that actually people are more comfortable now. I think the first lockdown people were a bit, quite very cautious, and probably rightly so.
But no one had a clue.
There wasn't really protocol in.
Completely uncharted territory. But now we've all got PPE, we've all got protocols in place. We're all taking it very seriously. And, and rightly so, shoots should be able to continue. As long as kind of client confidence is still high and they feel like they can go ahead, hopefully we should be able to keep going.
Yeah. And I've just been using the opportunity to crack on with catching up on scanning.
Now I saw this. I meant to message you about this the other day because I thought, that's a good idea and that's a good use of the time. And it looks like Greg has got a decent setup for it. Do you want to, for the ladies and gents who haven't seen the setup, do you want to kind of talk us through it?
Yeah. So, I got a few questions on Instagram about it because I put some pictures up in my stories, and there's actually a full walkthrough over on my Instagram in the stories, like a video walkthrough of anyone who wants to do it. It's one I shot earlier in the year during lockdown 1. So it was one I was doing it from home, and now in the studio, back in the studio. And basically, it's DSLR scanning. So you are using a copy stand and a light table, and then putting your negatives down below and effectively photographing them, and then taking it into software and using some software to cleverly turn them into positives. So I have it set up on next to my computer so I can actually tether straight into Lightroom. Normally I'd never bother tethering into Lightroom, but it's quite useful for this because the plugin that works with it is this Negative Lab Pro, which has recently had its 2.0 upgrade come out. And it's a very clever bit of software. It will take a raw file and turn that into a positive with kind of LUTs that you can put on top that will mimic a Frontier scan or an Aritsu scan and stuff like that. So the way I have it set up, I'm shooting it with a DSLR, with a Canon 5DR. 5DSR. So one of the old ones, but it's a very large sensor on that for a DSLR.
Oldie but a goodie.
Oldie but a goodie. It's got the Canon L macro 100mm lens on there, which has quite a large lens hood. That's all mounted onto a Kaiser copy stand and a Kaiser light table, LED light table. And then I just make a mask and use the lomography digitizing kind of neg holders. So they have a 35 film scanning mask and a 120 film scanning mask that you can pick up online, and it kind of holds the negatives in quite an easy way. You have the matte side of the negative facing up, and so obviously when you comes into Lightroom, you have to flip the image horizontally, and the rest, if the kind of details are all on my Instagram stories, if people want to look at that, it will kind of explain it all. But it's a good way to quickly get through, because once you're set up, I have to manually focus, and I use live view and just focus on the grain, and I focus for each image. But once you're set up, it's literally you take a shot, push it along one, take the next shot, push it along one, take the next shot, push it along one. You can burn through a 35mm film quite quickly with that. And then with my 120, I'm still using a flatbed. I use an Epson V600, which is not particularly exciting flatbed scanner, but if you're running OS X Catalina, you can't use their software anymore. So I now use VueScan. But the good thing with VueScan is it actually creates a DNG file, so a raw file from the scan, and you can then use the Negative Lab Pro again to be able to actually turn that into your image. Right. And it uses the same algorithm. I find it's easier to work with that than it is to work with the kind of VueScan Zone software to convert images. But everyone's got their preferences. I'm not super techie when it comes to this kind of stuff, but
it does sound quite techie.
I mean, it's all right. It didn't. I mean, if I can get my head around it, I think most people can get their head around it. The main thing you've got to be aware of is making sure your camera is absolutely level and solid in terms of, because when you're shooting on a light table, you're going to probably be shooting at like a 1/10 of a second f8, and you want to make sure that camera's not moving. And at the same time, if it's not level, then the plane of the actual digital sensor isn't level with the thing you're trying to scan in inverted commas, you're going to end up with part of the image in focus and part of it not in focus. So you're going to end up with some weird pictures.
Makes sense.
But yeah, it's pretty straightforward. It's a good thing to be doing if you've got time. I've used a tripod before rather than a copy stand, just inverted the head. Mm-hmm. A good little trick to level the camera is to either put a spirit level on the back or to use something like the Levels app on your phone. It's probably not the most accurate, but it's probably accurate enough for this. And then in terms of light tables, they're quite cheap to pick up online. Obviously, LED nowadays, pretty good. Most people might have an LED light panel sitting around even, or even a small, like these small kind of LED panels that you can, the lithium ion kind of battery packs. I think we both got one. I can't remember what make mine is, but it's a little one that you can use for video lighting.
Aperture.
Yeah, something like that might work. I haven't tried that myself. I've got an actual light table. But it's not like you're filming, so it's not like you need necessarily a constant light source. But if you're shooting at a slower shutter, then maybe that would be more of an issue.
I guess also you probably want one with a diffusion panel or kind of frosted perspex to get an even spread of light.
Yeah, you want an even light. That's the main thing. And you want to also try and cut out as much external light as possible. So don't be doing it in a room with bright sunshine if you can. But generally, you should be all right as long as there's not so, artificial light as well probably doesn't help if you've got fluorescents on or tungstens on. You don't want any light bleeds in there, especially if you're photographing color negs.
No, of course.
But yeah, have a go if people are kind of interested in doing that. It's a good way to digitize old negatives.
Very smart. Very smart. And the walkthroughs on your Instagram.
Yeah. So there's just us in story highlights.
There you go. Perfect.
Feel free to check that out.
From from a very old school tech to now obviously a very new school tech, segue. We have got Limanas, who is LS Digi, who is an amazing Digi-Tech coming on. And it's a super interesting chat. Now, full disclosure, it might get a little techie at some points, but bear with us, because it is actually fascinating what we can now, not what he can now do. So, should
Digital wizard.
Digital wizard over here, yeah. Should we get into it?
Let's get into it.
All right. So on today's episode, we are incredibly privileged to be joined by Limanas from LS Digi, who, in my eyes, is one of the world's best digital techs and digi operators. LS, how are you, man?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
Excellent. Well, it's honestly, we've been chatting for years now, probably on Instagram. I say we've been chatting. I have been annoying the hell out of you, like replying to pretty much everything you put up, going, "This is amazing. This is so cool." And for people who don't know, you, give us a little bit of background about yourself and kind of what it is you do.
So I am a professional Digi-Tech, London-based, and I run an equipment hire company. So that's kind of all I do. It's my
that's all I do. Come on,
it's all I do. I mean, a little bit of 3D printing as well, actually. Yeah. So I got into it about 10 years ago. I graduated from uni, studied photography, moved to London. Started assisting. It was always a plan to assist for a little bit and then shoot, because it's like the traditional thing. You get education tells you that is your route. It's education, but become a photographer. And as I was kind of getting into it a few years in, I kind of realized that there's like you get Digi-Techs, like professionals who specialize in tech. And I was always into it. My background has always been tech. From a young age, I was like building computers. I was always into it. So, and it kind of made sense to go into it myself. And I, gradually I started specializing, buying kit, learning everything there is about it, about workflows, about cameras, about, everything there is on set. And for the past 10 years, I've been doing this now. Yeah.
Excellent, man.
Talk us through, for some of our listeners who don't know kind of what the role of a Digi-Tech is, like dumb it down right to kind of just explaining the basics.
So
you're on shoots kind of alongside the photographer and their kind of first and second or whatever assistants.
Yes. So my role is I'm basically responsible for all the images that we capture on that day. So we usually shoot tethered or to card, and then all the images come through me into my computer, where I import them, name them, color correct them, adjust exposures, add metadata if I need to, and process everything. So basically my kind of main role is to take away all the pressure from the photographer for any kind of technical issues that might arise. So, camera's not tethering, it's my job to quickly fix it. We usually have very intense days, and you have to be ready, you have to have multiple cables ready, sometimes even multiple computers ready, and just being super aware of potential issues and being very on the ball in fixing anything that happens. And just making life as easy as possible. It's always like being a link in between the photographer and the client, because initially, like before I go on set, I usually have a chat with a photographer or a producer and ask them, what are the requirements, what are you looking for, what are the clients looking for, what deliverables we need to produce at the end of the shoot, to make sure that there's no surprises. I mean, most of the time, the standard is process JPEGs, but sometimes they need TIFFs, and it's kind of my role to make sure that the transition between the shoot and like the end of the day is as smooth as possible. As soon as we finish wrapping, as soon as possible, I just hand the hard drive to the producer or the client, and everyone's happy because everyone can go home and they have the data there, they have everything they need. So it's my job to make that as smooth of a day as possible.
So for photographers who've, there's going to be, with our listeners, we've got a whole range of people who are kind of starting out to kind of seasoned pros and everything in between. For photographers who haven't worked with Digis before, you turn up on set and you bring your kind of your arsenal of insane equipment that both myself and Tom quite often drool over on Instagram in your stories, especially
every day.
Yeah. You post a lot of great behind the scenes of your kit in action. So what's your kind of basic thing that you bring along? So you've got your cart, you've got your computers, you've got all of your systems that you kind of run us through some of the hardware, if you like.
Yeah, I mean, the hardware really depends from day to day. I mean, as a standard, the main thing that I come with is a computer, and that can either be, like a MacBook Pro or like the Mac Pro, like the new one, for like really intense shoots. And that's the main kind of the main thing that kind of comes with me. And then alongside, I can provide ISO monitors, video monitors, equipment carts. I've recently, since lockdown, got into streaming as well. So I kind of started specializing into streaming stills and video as well, just to adapt to the whole new world. And so my kit list is always changing. It's always very fluid, job to job, actually, in terms of what I need and what I bring on set.
Yeah, because you posted up some behind the scenes. You were doing a job. You were flown in by helicopter to the top of a mountain.
Oh yeah, that was a job with Finn Beals, and that was in Italy, which was probably one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had on shoot.
It was stunning. It looked absolutely amazing, and there's this beautiful shot that you put up of your stills stuff on the top of somewhere that you could only get to by helicopter. And I was like,
yes.
Oh, damn. That looks
I know.
great.
I took a little camera, just like, I was like, what? I need to take a picture of my new setup, because it was actually a setup that arrived 3 days before I set off, before we flew. So I bought a new video monitor, actually, which is like V-Lock powered. I invested in some wireless receiver sets, so we could be, on top of a mountain with no access to power whatsoever. Be able to power the laptop as well as a monitor for the entire day, and have social distancing, and I think it's like up to 400 feet away. I think you can technically have the monitor up to 400 feet away and still have a wireless signal.
That's amazing. With the kit, when you fly out for a job like that, sorry, this is purely from an interest from my interest point of view, selfish, sorry, listeners. When you're flying kit like that out, obviously you're not flying the batteries, right?
I am.
Are
Yes.
you?
So
Interesting.
I am. So
Okay.
I invested into 198 watt-hour batteries, VLOC batteries.
Which ones did you go for?
So I went for FX line ones, but there's a lot. There's like Core SWX.
SXWs, yeah.
That's the one. Yeah. There's so many different brands, and there's like Hawkwood ones. I think they're really good as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of choice out there. But yes,
so I use the FX Lions now to power all my kit, and I like them a lot. And also, for the listeners who maybe have used VLOCs in the past and haven't really stayed up to date with battery technology, they've brought out in the past year or two maybe. There's become a new standard which is mini VLOCs, and they are much lighter, much smaller, and roughly the same capacities, and they are fantastic for being able to just fit. You could probably now fit 3 in the space that 2 big VLOCs used to take, and it's much easier to just carry them about and stuff like that. So that's interesting. So how many did you fly with?
I flew with 4.
Okay. And because they're all under the 100 watt limit?
Correct, yeah. So
is there a maximum amount you can fly with?
Not in terms of the amount of batteries. It's all about individual batteries as far as I'm aware of. So I had I think 3 or 4 hyperjuicers, which I use for my laptop, and then 4 VLOCs that I use. So each VLOC on my monitor gives me 2 hours of runtime, which is ample. So 8 hour shoot, which is usually enough. It was definitely enough for that day, actually. So
nice.
Perfect.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, the those hyperjuicers, if anyone hasn't seen them, you actually, we'll get onto this in a minute, but you do custom stuff for all these kind of set. Well, actually, we'll talk about that in a bit, but it's amazing. You're in for a treat. Let's talk about the other aspects. Obviously, we talked about data wrangling and stuff like that, but let's talk about where some photographers, I'm speaking from my personal experience, where we can sometimes fall down. Like we're very much when we're on a high pressured shoot, we might be kind of just shooting, right? We might not have noticed that the ambient might have changed or something like that. And you're watching all the shots come through, and obviously with the advent of Thunderbolt 3 and USB-C, the files are coming through much quicker. So you're watching probably more of the images than we are if we're shooting quickly. So you can say, you're a little bit soft, or the exposure is slightly off. And so I've known Digis to have a wireless trigger with, so they can up the power of the key light, for example, if it drops and stuff like that, because sometimes the photographer is so into interacting with the model or trying to get the art part of it, that the text, maybe they haven't noticed that one of the lights has dropped or something like that. So do you want to talk about I might have just already done it a little bit, sorry. But yeah, do you want to
for me, actually?
I think the value of a good Digi is not just in the data wrangling and stuff like that. You touched on it earlier. It's, talking about understanding the deliverables, understanding what is being expected of the client, but also just working with the photographer and knowing that they've gone half a stop under by accident there, or they might have knocked a dial and then remotely changing it from capture and things like that. Because you guys really are worth your weight in gold.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very, very important role, I think, because different photographers expect different things, and some people want to be told the second that the image is slightly soft, whereas some photographers don't really want to hear from you until there's maybe 20 shots in a row. So it's all about relationships and etiquette and understanding what the photographer needs from you. And this is why it helps having a good relationship with the photographer, because you can just guide them. It is totally invaluable to be able to do it, because I will be the first one that will see the image. And so I can
have you
subtly hint it, different people prefer
I was going to say, so I personally, when I've used Digis in the past, my setup for the listeners is this is why I want to talk about the human aspect of the Digi and why I think they're so important, because the tech side of things, I'm horribly technically kind of literate. and my Digi setup is quite autonomous in a way, but I still think a Digi is one of the most important people on set. Even with my computer doing a lot of the kind of the data wrangling with macros and chronosync and all that kind of stuff, I think there's more to being a Digi than just the data stuff. And when I've worked with Digis in the past, I'm one of those guys who wants to know straight away if images are soft, but I don't want the client knowing. So I've kind of set up like little kind of cues, right? So if the image is soft and they're wearing a wedding ring, for example, I'll get them to tap their wedding ring, and like the client will have no idea. They'll just think that the Digi-Tech's
they will now.
Well,
you've given away your secrets.
No, Greg.
I thought you were going to say you had like some semaphore or something.
No,
or dance moves that they pull.
Because I am ever evolving. We've moved on from the wedding ring thing.
Oh, I see.
So we've got new methods. We've got new methods. Mainly them shouting straight at me. Yeah, right.
Tap the side of their nose.
Wink twice.
Tom, the photo's out of focus. That's normally just straight up. Honesty is the best policy. No, but I used to have kind of like secret codes. I still do, but I'm not going to announce them. Because it's nice, and this is where relationships come in, and this is why, because if you're working on a long job, you don't want to be telling the photographer every 5 minutes, oh, that image is soft, because it doesn't look good to the client. But if there's like it's like a cue or like or something also, you can do,
it breaks the concentration of the subject sometimes as well, or the subjects. If you've got a conversation that suddenly starts, sorry. Can you hear that?
Oh, we can definitely hear that.
Yeah, there's somebody getting murdered
furiously stabbing that body of yours. Can you please stop that?
The problem with sharing studios with artists, they're up to all sorts of fun and games. So yeah, sometimes you can break that conversation as just happened, and that destroys the flow, and often you can kind of. I'm going to have to go around there and I'm about to just hammer back on the wall. You can break the you can break the flow.
We're going to have to leave this in because that was just too perfect.
Yeah, and so it can really depend then with the kind of with the client. You've got like. I'm just gonna have to mute my mic, aren't I? But you get what I'm saying.
Yeah,
having that conversation,
shouting out of focus,
and
out of focus every 2 seconds. Right. Yeah,
it can really distract the client as well, like Tom's saying.
Yeah,
and sometimes you want to separate the photographer and the client a little bit so that the photographer has some space, not because you're trying to shield anything from the client, but just so that everybody is able to do their job. But what kind of techniques have you had to develop to do that?
It really depends, like photographer to photographer. Like as Thomas mentioned, we have with some people I have keywords like check settings, or like something really vague that could be like a camera setting, but actually that means focus. Or we have some visual cues. Or I was actually trying to think of like coming up with a product that like a little light comes up, like a little Bluetooth thing that I press and like a little light comes up, and I'm still thinking about it, right?
It should have a sound effect though as well, which should be like
a little alarm, red light. Or maybe something a little bit more subtle, but so different people kind of prefer different things for sure. And
I've had a genius idea. What about those electric shock dog collars?
Oh my god!
So when the photographer gets something out of focus, I'm not volunteering to test that.
Yeah, can we try a prototype on you?
But also with regards to kind of setting up separate monitors, and I think probably the tech for that has really advanced in the last kind of couple of years, isn't it?
Absolutely,
apologies to the listeners. Greg, for some reason, has got construction work happening on his microphone.
Yeah, the tech has definitely evolved. We're quite used to having like 2 separate setups now. So like if we shoot in a studio, I'll have my capture station on an innovative cart, and I'll have a really nicely braided 10-meter optical cable with power running to a second monitor on a lowboy, which has a keyboard setup. It has like a Thunderbolt dock, so the the computer can, the photographer can plug in like a USB drive, or so they have also the control of the station too if they want to, as well as a really good color balanced monitor, so they see exactly what I see. And now I'm also kind of evolving more towards wireless monitors, especially for location shoots, because ISO monitors are great for the studio, but as soon as you go to a place where there's either no power or limited power, just being constantly tethered to long cables is just, I find it a pain. So
Sure.
now I've switched over to wireless monitors now, like as we mentioned, V-Lock powered wireless transmitters. The color is not quite as accurate, but I find that for those kind of jobs when you rushing around and stuff, you can just come to the computer to check to check the color grade.
Sure, but also no one's eyes are quite, when you're outside and stuff, no one's eyes are kind of really that color accurate anyway when they're looking at an image on a monitor.
Absolutely.
And when you're looking at ISOs, for example, they are, I have my ISO set to 110 nits.
Yeah.
We're talking, as soon as you take a 110 nit monitor outside, it'll look not far off pitch black.
You just can't see the image. Yeah,
exactly.
I mean,
Small HD and Atomos things, they are designed to be 1,000 nits. They're designed to go really bright, and they are viewable without monitors, without shade, without hoods. And I think that is a really, really sensible. I think it's so sensible that is also what I am doing.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big revelation, to be honest. It was a photographer that I was working with that just started using that, and I found that such a nice relief to be wireless, not having to worry about electricity constantly wherever I go. And for that specific shoot that we talked about in Italy, that was an absolute lifesaver, because we were shooting on a very bright day. And I didn't even have a hood for the monitor. Everybody could clearly see the image. It was much nicer on that monitor than it was on my own laptop, which had like a hood on it and stuff. So yeah.
Thing is, as well, you can push the boat out in terms of actually getting stuff absolutely perfect. And we've all been on set when somebody kind of on the team is perhaps like leant over and taken a picture of the screen on their phone to send it off to the client for approval anyway. And you're like, I've spent all this effort trying to get this, this perfectly calibrated version of the shot out, and it's being sent off for approval from an iPhone.
So I have this is a neat little trick, right? So I have in my Capture One process recipes, I have because we can stick stickers on our screens that do not touch the screen or do not photograph the screen. But I have a recipe that I have activated when I'm tethering that puts a watermark on the bottom of the image that says, "This is private. Do not photograph screen. This is under NDA." So anyone who sends out an image or a photograph of that image is sharing an image that has a private watermark on it, showing that is not for sharing.
Yeah, that's a really good trick, actually, because on Capture One, you can set that up as an overlay, I guess, as like a little subtle overlay.
You don't even have to set it right. You don't even have to set it up as an overlay. If for some reason, if you have that, you don't even have to activate it as a you don't have to even check the tick box to have it activated in the output recipes. You can just highlight it. So just click on the recipe, and then the previews will show on the screen with the watermark.
So then you could have a scamp, an overlay, as well as a watermark.
Yeah, you can have everything
at the same time.
Yeah, 100%. So it's and obviously you could change the opacity and fonts and all sorts of technical stuff. But yeah, no, it's great, because whenever when I'm dealing with a delicate thing, I did a shoot for a high-end tech company that rhymes. Actually, I'm not going to do that rhymes with. I'm under NDA. I'm not allowed to talk about it. But I did it. It was a very high-end tech company, and it was to do with a big merger with another high-end tech company. And there were people who came in to the shoot, hadn't introduced themselves to me or anyone. They were obviously meant to be there, but we had security on the door, because we were so worried about there being kind of like some sort of, either the press or someone finding out about this merger, that we had to have security on the door and stuff like that. So having the watermark on it basically proved that I was doing my job, that this was a closed set and that this was a private shoot and this should not be shared under any circumstances. Yeah. So, it was very much their call to share it.
Interesting. So one other thing, I mean, that you have to do quite a lot is obviously, a lot of your job, like photographers' jobs, is problem solving. One thing that anybody who follows you on Instagram will be aware of is your wonderful contraptions and inventions and all sorts of stuff that you do, and you're 3D printing. Can you talk us through kind of a bit about that? Like, how did you get into that? Is it something that's has worked out well for you? Because it seems like it's a nice little sideline.
Well, before you jump in, can I just say I own almost everything you do, and they make my life so much easier. Like, I'm not even going to blow smoke up. They are absolutely. Do you know when you pick something up, and it happens a lot in the photography world, in the moving image world, and you go, yeah, this is great. When you pick, when you pick something up and you
well
go,
made and well thought out.
Well made, well thought out. I love the finish on it. I big fan right here. Big fan. So
thank you so much. It means a lot to me. I think I started off a couple of years ago now. It's probably been about 2 years ago, and it stemmed from being frustrated of coming up with an idea, but then looking for a product and it not existing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I started looking into it, and I kind of saw 3D printing. I was like, oh, that's cool, and I didn't even think of it as I could use that, for myself. And the more research I did, I eventually got my first 3D printer. I thought it was going to be super easy, draw something up really quickly, press print, and it would come out amazingly. And that was so far from the truth. I think the first year I wasted so much, luckily biodegradable plastic, but it's so difficult. There's a design aspect of actually doing it in 3D CAD, but then there's also the printing aspect, which is called the slicing of the file. So you're essentially programming the 3D printer to print that object in a certain way, which is so complicated. So that took me a very, very long time. It was a steep learning curve, but also very exciting because, it's just something new, and being able to come up with an idea, design it, and print it was just so satisfying. But yeah, that's kind of how it came about. So I started, the first thing that I ever wanted to do actually was the Hyperjuice holder. As the 100-watt Hyperjuice came out, I think I bought the new touchpad, the USB-C laptop, and there was no kind of nice way of swapping the batteries. You had those clunky innovative brackets, which are horrible to unscrew and, reclamp again. So
they're big. They're really big, those clamps.
Yeah. And they're just kind of quite awkward to use. And, you go through a lot of these batteries every day. I mean, on a one-day shoot, you can easily go between 4 to 7 batteries a day. So you need to change them quite quickly, quite often. So yeah, I just came up with an idea of creating a mount, and a few versions later now, I finally got it to a place where I'm really happy with it, and it works. And I use it every day now on every shoot, and it's been awesome.
Yeah, because obviously we both run the plate system.
Yes.
For those that don't know it, innovative.com, inovativ.com. So no E on the end of it. And they make a very, very solid product. It's full of 3/8 screws, and really they should buy you out. Bluntly, honestly, the stuff you do is a perfect finishing touch to what is a very good product. And so you do amazing. You do like little. Sorry, I'm obviously big fan here. You do lovely cable clamps, for example.
Yeah,
you can route your cables, and you don't have to have loose cables tucked under or gaff taped, or what your products enable me to do is have a very, very tidy setup. And because it's tidy and there's no loose cables, and the batteries are nicely clamped into their holders, I can pick the plate up off the tripod, stick it in the case, close the lid. I don't have to worry about unplugging anything. I don't have to worry about anything else like that. it is very much it has sped up my workflow a lot. And the nice thing about your base, for example, is it's got Arca built into it. So I can, if I want to run it on my low boy, I just use the baby pin straight up into the bottom of the base. Or if I want to run it on a tripod, I just clamp it straight onto the Arca, the head that I have. Well, I actually have a leveling head on the tripod.
Yes, I think it's probably my favorite thing actually so far. It's the only thing that I CNC'd actually as well. But yeah, that was my favorite product. So when I initially got the Digi-Plate, I was like really happy with it. But then I had the Arca tripod quick release, which was really good. But then on the innovative bit, you have to screw in this plate, which becomes loose. And then once you screw it in, you can't put the tray down, the laptop tray down, because it's a little bit too tall. It ends up wobbling the whole tray because the legs around it are shorter than the base with the Arca Swiss attached. And I was kind of looking at it one day and I was like, oh, hey, hold on a minute. Why isn't this already part of the base? All it needs is a little triangular bit at the bottom. And then I kind of started looking at it, designed it, made it much smaller because in my eyes, it didn't need to be that big. So I made it a little bit more compact. And now I use it between a baby pin mount on my innovative cart, because that's how I usually have my laptop. It sits on there, or a trapper. So if I need to quickly go off to a different room and it's too difficult to navigate with a cart, like if you're shooting inside, I just quickly chuck it on legs, clamp it, off we go. Nice and quick. No kind of messing around.
It's really good, and and also what's great about it is it enables you to have more stuff mounted on the plate because it's taking up less room, and it's you can put it in different spots on the plate because it's still got the security mount, security pin on it and stuff like that. It's a very, very neat product, and it's interesting because I for years have created solutions for problems that I found. Like I think as photographers we are problem solvers, really. Problems come up, whether they're to do with equipment or situations and things like that. And it's really nice to have met you, a kind of a fellow problem solver, but also, your products really are great.
Thank you so much.
Where do you see like because it's fascinating that there's not many that I've seen in the UK of Digi-Techs who are taking it to the level that you're taking it in terms of making. I'm sure there are that people I'm unaware of, but I know in the States there's a few guys like Digi Richie, for example. His feed is really interesting because he 3D prints all sorts of stuff as well. And where do you think kind of 3D printing is heading in the future? Like, do you think there's the application itself will be more widely used? Because it's something I've always been interested in getting into, but have been somewhat put off by the fact that the technical side of it is probably going to be a bit beyond me. Do you feel like it's going to get simpler and more? Because when it came out, it was one of those technologies that everyone was like, this is amazing, this is the future, everyone's going to be 3D printing. And from a conceptual point of view, it's got so much potential because you potentially cut out the need to, something breaks and you can build a replacement part. There's so many applications that it could be used for, but it just hasn't picked up and taken off in the way that people originally thought it would.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I think it's a very popular thing, but a lot of the time it's still a hobby for people. Like people buy 3D printers and end up, printing figurines and, random stuff or like objects they find on Thingiverse, which is like a website where you can download stuff and print. That's already made.
What website was that? Sorry,
it's I think it's called Thingiverse.com, and that has like a huge stock of free files where you can download, put it into your slicing software, and print. And a lot of the stuff is there's so many uses on it. So I don't know where to start. You can find almost everything on it. Not a lot of photography stuff, though, obviously.
Do you know what, though? It's interesting because there are things like lens caps. And lens caps, body caps, stuff like that goes missing all the time. Like all the time. I must have spent thousands on all that crap over the years. And actually, if I could just print up a couple of if I go and, oh, bloody hell, I've lost that lens cap. Oh, don't worry, I'll print one tonight with my logo in it. I'm into that. I'm into that idea.
It's true. the only downside to that is the printing technology, like the stuff that is affordable, and by that I mean like up to £5,000, per printer. It's using like a FDM technology, so it's printing per layer. And the only downside of that is that you get certain limitations. So number one is strength. There is weakness in the layer, like the way it's printed. And number two, it's shape. Because it's a 3D shape and you start from the bottom and it's kind of printing layer per layer, you can't create very complex shapes because like overhangs don't print very well. So you have to already design a product with that in mind.
Yeah.
What I started doing is, because I keep running into this limitation, like with my home printer, I actually started outsourcing it to a different 3D company in London. And so they do a lot of my printing stuff. So like the hyperjuice mounts and like the cable clips and stuff, it's all actually outsourced, and they have these huge machines worth hundreds of thousands of pounds, and they use this technology called SLS 3D printing, and they have huge chambers of nylon dust, and they fire lasers into that dust and they fuse the products together. So when it comes out, it's like a solid, incredibly strong, lightweight product that then goes through another 3 post-processing machines, and it ends up looking really nice and quite premium now. They've just released a few different
it's got a really nice finish. Finish.
Yeah.
It's like a matte, it's like a matte black. It's cool. Like,
yeah, it feels like a finished product, and that's the thing what I've always strived for. When I started printing, I'm like, I can see the layers, and I'm quite a perfectionist, so I keep running into these limitations. But now that I found these guys, and this is why I tend to use now for my finished products.
Yeah, they're great. They're great. So we on this podcast, we're going to change tack a little bit. On this podcast, we are trying to like advocate for best practice. We're trying to help people with their workflows. There's a lot of photographers who have fallen into workflows. So say, for example, they've kind of, just as their career has progressed, they might have been really busy one year and their workflow kind of went off in that direction. They've just stuck with it. Might actually be a bit of a bad habit, and data wrangling and backups and stuff like that. People sometimes, maybe fall into habits that maybe we shouldn't be encouraging. Not going to say bad habits, but like people will pick up workflows as and when, and they all kind of form into everyone's individual workflows. Do you have like if there was going to be like a perfect workflow from a Digi side of things, is there a perfect workflow, or is there things for people to look out for, like naming conventions, or even just making sure if you're going to be using multiple cameras that the clocks are set the same, like basic
That's
stuff?
That's a really good tip. Yeah, the clock thing is super important if you're shooting tethered. Sorry, not tethered. If you're shooting to card and multiple cameras, that really helps, because syncing that clock every morning. I actually do it every morning because I actually find that it deviates quite quickly, oddly enough. So I set the clock every morning if we're shooting to card, and that really allows you to organize the images in the correct way.
Sure.
Some shoots that I do,
as soon as they go out of chronological order,
it just becomes a little messy. You're flicking through a folder and there's stuff from the start of the shot and then the end of the shot, and then people get confused, like, why are the images there? And it can happen a lot. Like, for example, a lot of the shoots I do these days is for like lifestyle and sports, and we shoot with 2-3 cameras sometimes, like one like A7R4 tethered, another one to card, then I've got a Leica. So there's so much to think about. There's images that are coming in with the tether. That's kind of quite simple because it's already named, because you can use tokens on Capture One for naming conventions. That helps massively. But then you've also got data coming in after you've done a shot from cards, and you need to make sure that it's all kind of aligned and it goes in the correct folders, and it can be quite intense. I've done a few jobs recently where we were shooting 10 to 15,000 images a day, which was mounting between 500 to 750 gigabytes a day, and there were
quite a bit.
Yeah, and I think it was a 30-day shoot overall. It was like the first shoot out of lockdown that I did. and I think 60 days overall with prep days and some travel work. And it was probably the biggest job I've ever done in my life. And, we had very particular clients which wanted, particular naming formats. And then as well as that, it was the first shoot out of lockdown that we had. So the reason why I was kind of picked for the job is because during lockdown, I came up with a few streaming solutions. And one of them was like broadcasting my capture session via a secure link. So clients can go on a website, a specific web link, type in the password and see exactly what we have in the capture folder and be able to rate images as we go along and that sort of stuff. So it was really intense, keeping track of everything, because you have you're worrying about on-set troubleshooting, then you're worrying about internet and connection problems or streaming problems, and then you're worrying about monitors. So yeah, it was quite a big and intense shoot for me to
did it go all right?
It did go all right. There was a lot of new things that I had to learn, like video streaming with Teradek, which I haven't touched at that point. So, initially my job was only stills, but when we started talking about the video aspect, the DIT didn't know, they've never done live streaming before. And then suddenly I kind of took the job on. I was like, oh, cool, maybe I can look into this and maybe I can learn something quickly. And then 2 days before the shoot, started reading on the Teradek stuff, set up Teradek hardware like Teradek Cube for the video camera, and sorted out secure live streaming to clients in, I think they were in San Francisco or LA. And
I assume that is like just exporting like an encoded H.265.
Yeah.
stream.
So the Cube does 265, which is good because it's almost half of the bandwidth of 264, I believe.
Yep.
Which it makes it a little bit easier if you have dodgy internet connection, because like a lot of the job was actually on location. So we weren't shooting just in the studio with reliable connection. We were actually using 4 different SIM cards bonded to a single connection for the video. So 4 LTEs going into one connection and then outputting it to a cloud service, Teradek cloud service, which then went into all the clients that were tuning into it live to watch it live.
Wow.
So
and if you were wondering, I was going to say, if you were wondering about LS's credentials, that is how tech he is. Actually, when you think about what you've just said and what you were doing, that is unheard of a year, 2 years, 3 years. And if you could go back 20 years and say, this is what we're going to be doing, people would lose their minds.
Yeah,
so that's incredible.
It was a steep learning curve from, not working for 3-4 months to going into something that was as intense as that. And I mean, it wasn't, problem free. We had to find many different solutions to accommodate the client's needs, evolving needs, like daily evolving needs, and changing briefs and changing methods of delivery. So yeah, we had to be very adaptable and very kind of on the ball and trying to, not chew too much, sort of not take too much on, but also at the same time make the client happy and
of course
make it work.
Going back to kind of like workflow practice, basic things like keeping the cameras in sync, stuff like that. Is there, obviously every photographer has a different file naming convention, things like that. Would you suggest, for example, don't worry, I'm not going to say your name, not your name, but the person I'm talking about now, I know they listen and I know they know it's coming. I'm not going to name and shame, but they had, for example, a Lightroom catalog that I think had 9 years worth of work and edits in. They didn't have it backed up. They didn't have the catalog backed up, and something happened to the catalog, which meant they couldn't open it up. So they effectively lost 9 years worth of work, because they had it all in this proprietary Lightroom catalog. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to name and shame, but it's a bit silly. I mean, it's not an ideal, it's not a very safe way of working.
So did they have a backup at all of the work?
No.
I thought you meant just the catalog and like the adjustment to the images.
Sorry. Yes, the work was fine. The original files were still intact because it wasn't a hard drive failure. It was something to do with the
corruption on
the catalog.
Yeah, I've had that before.
Yeah, and I think people think that it won't ever happen to me. Probably will.
Yeah, it can easily happen for sure.
Yeah, and it happens on Lightroom catalogs. It happens on capture sessions and catalogs. It just happens, right? Like, it's part of the workflow. But this chap or lady, could be either, because I'm not going to mention his or her name. But he, sorry, or she. Whoops. He lost.
So Brian,
Brian. Brian had lost all his edits for the past 9 years, and actually, kind of go, well, that's a huge amount of work. I would never want to be in that position. So I personally use a new session for every shoot. And I don't know if there's like a workflow practice that you would advocate. I assume probably a new session per shoot. And do you do a new session per shoot day, or do you just keep every? Yeah.
My usual workflow is one session per day. That's kind of my go-to. In terms of like the naming conventions, I usually go with like more of an American dating format. So, for example, I would go like year, month, date, because when you put everything in one folder, it kind of all makes sense. In terms of you can quickly find where that shoot is. Like, if it's like 2019, you can quickly find it. Whereas if you start with, a lot of people I know in the UK start with day, month, year, which in my opinion is, if to me, like it doesn't, it's not helpful, and the files would be everywhere. Unless you're doing it like per client, and even then, the folder structure would be a nightmare. So I usually go with month, day. That's my go-to format, and then underscore and like a job name or something like that. And each day is its own session, because the more files you cram into a session, the slower it gets. And that is one thing that I've found recently, since like the A7Rs came out, the Canon R5, which allow you to shoot really quickly. I mean, like really big files really quickly. The session starts slowing down. Even on the fastest MacBook Pros, we're using like 8-core MacBook Pros, 64 gig RAM, 8 terabyte hard drives, SSDs. Even on those computers, and as you go over 400 gig, 350 gig, it becomes slower to import, slower to rename. And that's partly Capture One's fault. That's partly to do with the software not being very well optimized for like multi-cores and GPU usage. That's one thing that I keep emailing Capture One and trying to poke them and go like, please don't release new features, but please could you optimize the software? Like now I've got the new 16-core Mac Pro, which I've just started using, and it's really quick. It's it doesn't overheat like the laptops constantly do. It doesn't throttle, so it's significantly faster, but it's also not as fast as it should be. Like there's so much more potential, and video software have really got it together. That's totally optimized. It's using all the cores, all the RAM, all the GPUs, multiple GPUs. But sadly, Capture One is not quite there yet.
Do you feel that is because with moving image, there's always been more data to move around, so they had to get their act together with threading and stuff like that? And
absolutely,
with stills, it kind of didn't really matter that much.
It's
and
the
now
classic
suddenly,
stills thing. You can get away with it, and nothing is as good as it could be. It's kind of good enough, and that's one thing that I fundamentally disagree with when it comes to anything. Just having something good enough is not really good enough. It should be as best as it could be, and if it's a piece of software, it should be optimized to the latest computers, the latest cameras. But I'm sure they're going to get there soon.
I hope so.
Yeah, we're still.
I know. There's a new version coming, because they keep announcing new versions, but none of the features.
Yeah,
it's available. Pre-order it now. I'm going to wait. I got stung on it last time. I was like, oh my God, there's a new version. And then when I downloaded it, I was like, it's pretty much the same. Like there's nothing new.
Yeah.
So, got stung a little there.
So what you've got so far on the tips, we've got syncing the cameras, we've got your kind of file naming conventions. Is there anything else is there anything on the hardware side of things that photographers should bear in mind in terms of, I'm sure you've turned up on jobs and people have got like Amazon basic cables running from their cameras to their computers or stuff that you feel like it's just going to cause more problems than it's worth. What side, from the hardware side of things, is there anything that you'd...
From hardware side of things, one thing that keeps popping up is hard drives, and clients will buy lacies which have USB-C, but what they don't get is that even though it's got a USB-C cable, you don't get full USB-C speeds. You get maybe 80 megasecond when you are shooting 750 gig a day, and that takes so much time to back up to. So like having swapping to SSDs is like a really good thing to do now, because I think pricing wise it's much more affordable. Like you can get Samsung T5s on Amazon really cheap now. It's like just other brands are available.
Shout out to my guys, G-Technology.
Glyph, all those guys. Having SSDs,
the great thing with the T5s, I mean, you can literally the T5s are so small that that G-Tech one as well is like you can just pop it in your pocket. So when I'm away on assignment, like a travel assignment, which it's normally sometimes myself and an assistant, but normally just going solo. At the end of the day, I will be backing up to my laptop and then backing up to 2 further drives, one of which stays somewhere in the hotel room separate from the laptop, and the third drive goes with me wherever I go because it's so small. It goes in my pocket, so I don't even have to have a bag with me if I go out in the evening. I can take the entire shoot with me in my pocket, and
you can have it encrypted. So that's what I do. So I have a little G-Technology 2 terabyte drive, and so what I do is I obviously when back to normal shooting kind of rates, obviously COVID's had a small impact.
Just a tiny,
just a tiny bit. But normally, I'm doing kind of multiple shoots a week, and I won't have time to go out and update my offsite backup every week. So what I'll do is I'll run all my shoots onto the G-Technology small drive, and I'll just carry them around on me. So it means technically I do have an offsite backup of the shoots. Because I always advocate the 3-2-1 rule of data backup, because it's
100%.
For people who, I'm not going to go into it now because we've already covered it in depth in a previous podcast. Go and check out episode 6 or whatever the first Tom and Greg episode was, where we talk about workflows. But that's kind of why these small drives are so great. And for me, at the end of the shoot, what I will do is I will back up everything from the shoot to the little SSD, but also I shoot simultaneous to SD cards on the Sony, for example, is what I use. So at the end of the day, I have 4 copies of the data, 2 on SDs, 1 on the MacBook Pro, and 1 on the SSD hard drive. And I will keep 1 card in the camera. I'll take 1 card out, and we've all got a pair of jeans with this pocket, right? No one knows what it's for. It just exists.
It's a Johnny pocket.
But
did you not see the Levi's?
I don't want to be that guy, my friend, but they just don't fit. But it's sorry, that was horribly crude. It's that, right? It's the enjoyment pocket or whatever it's called, the coin pocket. That's what they call it, right? But for me, I've never had anything that fitted. And then one day I found out.
How big are your coins?
I mean,
what currency are you using?
But hang on, which pocket are you talking about? Are you talking about the little pocket on the right hand?
I was about to stand up and show you the pocket I was talking about on camera.
I'm not
the
wearing
little pocket inside your hip pocket.
Yeah, right. Okay, so it's the same one.
Fit coins in that. Are you using chocolate gold coins? What's sovereigns?
I might be. I've not used cash now this year at
just
all.
Gold.
So Can't remember how big
Tom
these coins
trading
were.
in florins. I bid you, sir. Can I pay for this with my golden nugget?
I bid thee farewell. But so I take one of the cards out of the camera, and it goes straight into that pocket, which actually is a great place to put it because it won't pop out, it won't fall out because that pocket is surprisingly deep. So you stick an SD card down all the way there, and so then I've got the hard drive on me. I've got the SD card in the pocket. I've got the MacBook Pro somewhere else, and then I've got the original one in the camera bag. And because then they get spaced out.
How many SD cards have gone in the washing machine, Tom?
One.
I think this is why you use the Sony Tough cards, right?
No, I actually have started using the Angel Bird SD cards. Yeah,
I use their readers actually. Just recently started using the readers for CFast, CF Express cards as well as LPs.
Do you know what? I got to say, solid products. Really like the branding. They work really well, and I had to start using them because for years I'd been using SanDisk cards, and I bought the most expensive SanDisk SD cards, the 300 megasecond read write, and bought a Sony A7S III. And because even though these SanDisk cards are 300 megasecond read and write, which is it's as fast as you can get an SD card, they will not work in the A7S III because they are not rated as V90. Even though they could do it, they could physically do it. They won't. The camera just goes nope. So I picked up a load of the Angel Bird cards, and so far, I don't know what your experience is with them, but I've used the Angel Bird stuff for the Atomos as well. Really, really good.
Really nicely engineered. I think they're engineered in Europe, right? I don't know.
Austria. They're an Austrian company.
Yeah, Austrian company.
Yeah. Really, I'm actually a really big fan.
Yes, me too. Their readers are really tough, like very nicely engineered aluminium enclosure. The cables are amazing, like the tolerance on the cable when you plug it in the back, it's super secure, and it just makes a very solid connection. Unlike most of the SD readers where you could easily pull the cable out by accident. That one goes in perfectly, and it just stays in there. It's super secure.
Nice. Well, actually, let's go back to Greg's point about cables, because as we just discussed, not all cables are created equal.
No,
they
definitely not.
They just aren't. And let's face it, you're only as strong as your weakest link. So if you are going to have something go wrong, it might in all probably be a cable. Because
tether cables can break so easily these days, and most people use tether tools, which I have stopped using in the last few years.
So I love tether tools stuff, and I have used it for a lot. I have used it for years, and I've never had, touch wood, I've never had a fault. But I understand that my cables probably don't get as much battering as your stuff.
I think so, yeah. I've recently switched to Area 51 cables, actually, which are based in the States. It's a guy called Scott, who's also like a Digi-Tech and a DIT, and he created a company. And they're really great cables. And one good thing with them is they come in 10-meter lengths. So you can get a C to C with 10 meters, and there's no kind of link in the middle, which you could easily unplug.
Right.
So that has been super useful. Before that, I actually custom made a 10-meter cable, which was also powered. It was like a 10-meter cable that actually I got it to about 24 meters long. I had to shoot in Barcelona once, and we had this crazy location on top of like the hill overlooking Barcelona, and we needed to rig a camera up on this really tall cherry picker. And I think we had 24-meter cable in the end. So like a daisy chain, my cable created like custom power. And it worked. We tethered the whole day, so that camera was there rigged, and we were shooting from it the whole day, basically from the ground.
Wow,
that's amazing.
Cool. Yeah, so you can get the tether cables longer by powering them. There's a specific method of doing it, but these cables specifically are just really clean. There's no power cables running alongside them. Very reliable so far, so I'm super happy with them.
I saw something the other day. I think you'd posted, which was that, and it was a cable kind of clamp for under the camera.
Let's talk about Photo Fortress.
Photo Fortress, yes. So it was actually a friend of mine, Nick Collins, who's another assistant. I think he's shooting as well now. He came up with it, I think, almost like definitely over a year ago, because he showed it to me on a shoot that I was with him, but he's finally released it into the world, and we used it yesterday, and I absolutely loved it. It's so nice not having to look for the Leatherman to undo the tether plate to quickly change a cable or to go, to shoot a card quickly. You just unclip it and the cable comes out, and the tether blocker stays stays on the camera at all times. You don't have to remove it. It's amazing. It's actually another 3D printed product.
Wow, and he's selling it on Amazon, I believe.
Yes, you can get it on Amazon. Yeah.
Ah, fantastic. Well, we'll link to that. Is there anything else that you've been using recently, apart from obviously your own products, which we'll also link to?
Very good products.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else that you've been kind of enjoying, or
because
setups that you've seen that you've gone, actually, this is interesting?
Because I don't think this chat's been nerdy enough. So let's talk.
Give us, we've probably got another 10 minutes of nerdiness. Let's turn it up to 11.
What else have I been into lately? Networking. Initially, it started off as a little project which me and Tom talked about, with like creating a new network for my house, which then led to me kind of doing more research into it. And now I'm creating like on-set networks and putting it in multiple rooms, which gives you like a solid Wi-Fi connection, and for using stuff like Capture Pilot. Like Capture Pilot is notoriously bad, but that's mainly because people use studio routers, which are already, you have like 30 people connected to them, hammering it with Instagram. So if you have now bought some Teradek stuff, which is pricey but very reliable routers, and I use them now, and they're like VLOC powered, so we can be in any location and get very reliable internet connection going into iPads. Like iPads is actually another thing that I recently started using. So I bought a 12.9 inch iPad Pro, and now I use it as a secondary display or like a third display or anything like so. Like even like which is incredibly useful. And there's many different uses for it. You can either use it as sidecar, so you can have it like as a selectively mirrored monitor, or you can use it alongside video receivers. So like I have one trigger on my Digi-Plate, which is kind of sitting on top of it, and it's given a 1080p stream to my small HD monitor, the one that we talked about, the wireless monitor. But at the same time, the TX unit, it also gives a feed to multiple iPads. You can connect like up to 4, or with a Teradek Surf Pro, which is another amazing product, you can connect up to 10 iPads. So like up to 10 people can view the images on set. They can be using phones, their own iPads, or iPads that you can provide, And that has been really good. And like COVID has really thrown a spanner obviously in the works, because we all have to kind of space ourselves as much as possible, which is always quite difficult. It's been a big challenge because, you still need team members. There's still several lighting assistants, stylists, and stylist assistants that need to be on set. So just being able to hand some devices, like wireless devices, that people can just keep hold of them for themselves. So it's been really useful, giving like an iPad to a set stylist who can keep an eye on the images coming through.
What's the TX unit you've got that does the stream out to the iPads?
So the one that I'm using most of the time is the Holyland 400S.
Right.
And it can
my order went in yesterday for one.
Oh yes, good choice. I do like them actually. So you can either do one monitor on 1080p and up to 4 devices, or if you buy multiple RX units, you can do 2 monitors, but no iOS devices.
Right. Okay.
And yeah, it's been reliable. I think
really for good. Most people's shoots, on small to medium sized client shoots, one monitor and up to 4. Was it 4 iOS?
That's up to 4.
Quite a lot.
It's good enough most of the time. And if it isn't, you can go a different route. You can hardwire. You can use. You can go like a Teradek route or like a Vaxis route. There's other options out there which allow you more RX units with a little bit smaller latency actually.
Is there, right?
I
mean, for stills, less of an issue.
Not as important. For video, definitely. Like
Sure.
you can't use it for focus pulling or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Even though, like, I also found that for one monitor, it works very well. There's very little latency. But if you plug in two monitors, so if you have two RX units, that's when you can noticeably see a slower latency.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Makes sense. And for the iPads on Sidecar, sorry, let's not go into that now. I, on my Instagram, put up something the other day. I think you saw it, LS. And I'm going to be doing a bit of a blog post about how the Sidecar stuff works and things like that, because it's a useful thing to know.
Yeah, before Sidecar, I mean, I was kind of refusing to upgrade to Catalina, which is, I think, when they started supporting those image. But I kind of refused to upgrade to the latest one. So I used Luna Display, which was another little USB-C dongle, which basically did the same thing as Sidecar does now, except you used a USB-C port, which is sometimes a little bit annoying because you're always quite limited with them. But yeah, now I just use Sidecar, which has been really, really helpful. Yeah,
and I think the nice thing for me about Sidecar is that it's just works over Bluetooth.
Yeah.
So you don't even have to worry about creating a Wi-Fi network or anything like that. You can have up to 10, 12 meters really, which is clean enough distance. I mean, is it quite nice as a Digi who probably in the past has had lots of clients, leaning over shoulders, and kind of touching screens and stuff? Is it quite nice to just now have a bit more space? I'm trying to find silver linings for COVID. There haven't been very many.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could say that nobody has gotten close to me, but people still do.
Yeah.
Even from the beginning,
case.
I was wearing masks, and some clients were just kind of choosing not to. And then I literally give them a screen, and I'm like, "Hey, this is your personal screen. You can see everything that I can see." And I had people walk over to literally right behind me, and go, "Oh, I just prefer looking at your screen," and it's the same screen. But in the ideal world,
your screen does look better. The grass is always greener. You see, that's the trouble.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a little bit nice. I haven't actually done that many studio shoots. I've been incredibly busy since June, but I've done maybe like 3 days in the studio actually so far. Most of my shoots have been on location, outdoors, or in location houses. So I haven't done that many studio shoots actually lately. But yeah, it's definitely one area that like a Digi-Tech can now help is supplying enough monitors and creating a good amount of distance between yourselves and others, and just creating a safe practice really. And I think being responsible on set is very important.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. I don't think you can now not get away with being responsible on set. I think you absolutely have to be. I was seeing some people putting up some behind the scenes pictures the other day, and they were 3 or 4 people around a computer with no masks. And I was just like, guys, come on. Like, I don't know if there's a pandemic on. We are lucky that we are going to be able to keep shooting through this second lockdown. Providing client confidence is still riding high and whatnot, but doing stuff like that is just silly. It's just really sorry, I don't mean to be down, but like just wear a mask. Like
it's not difficult.
No, give people a space. Like just be safe. You might not care about it, but you don't wear a mask for you wear a mask for everyone else. It's just polite. Anyway. Sorry. That's miserable Tom coming out. So let's talk. I mean, to be honest, I think that's pretty much most of our
questions have been done.
Yeah. What a lovely chat. I love talking tech. It's like genuinely one of my favorite things ever. So yeah, right. That's it. Yeah, same here.
We always have at the end of our talks, we always have the question about your Desert Island camera and your Desert Island book. Have you had some thoughts on that?
Yeah, funny. Like I said, I mean, I'm like a full-on Digi-Tech, so I don't really shoot anymore. But when I think of like my favorite camera, it's probably going to be like an RB67, because when I was my education started with a digital photography course back in like 2005. So I started using, horrible digital cameras. And it's only once I got into uni that that I went into film, and I almost exclusively shot film all 3 years of my university on 5.4 on medium format, and the RB has been my favorite camera. I still have it. It's collecting dust, but it's still with me.
You still have it.
Original.
To be honest, man, look at the size of your arms. You're definitely strong enough to use it.
I don't know.
Exactly. For those that have never used an RB67, you have to be like Arnold Schwarzenegger in his like gold gym kind of like peak heyday to be able to use the thing. It is
I think that's why
wildly.
Probably can't even lift anymore.
It's wildly heavy. Beautiful thing.
Amazing thing. Beautiful to shoot with. Slow, but that's kind of quite nice about that.
That's the charm, isn't it? And also the clunk.
The clunk.
Oh my god! I would say
about the clunk.
I know this is like, is it ASMR or whatever? But like the clunk of that camera.
Wow. Special niche. I think you could.
Yeah, man.
Definitely open up like a cool new ASMR.
Tom, don't you have it as your ringtone when you get a text message?
No, it just sounds like a fallen.
The sound of an RB6.
Do you know what though? I do think the RB67. Sorry to go on, but the RB67 has got the second best shutter sound of a 6.7. The Asahi Pentax 6.7 is one of the all-time great camera sounds. And
this week on great camera.
Yeah, right. Welcome to the Exposed Negative ASMR section. No, let's not go into that. But yeah, you're right. It's a fantastic camera. So yeah, I'm quite jealous. I don't actually own one.
Sorry, go on.
No, go on.
I was going to say another one of my favorite cameras is probably a Hasselblad 503. I still have a few photographers who are still using the 503, but with a digital back, and it's I think it's still by far my favorite setup, because you have the advantage of having a beautiful file, like from either P45 or like an IQ 150, 250, 280, whatever. Also the beautiful mechanical aspect of it, and there's still a few people out there who are shooting, like Nick Knight is still shooting with it, and it's a real pleasure being part of it.
How are those new Digi backs that they're bringing out for the
V backs?
I have stayed away from Hasselblad backs as much as I could. They are beautiful hardware, and I'm sure they take great pictures. But the fact that you have to use focus is the number one and the biggest downside to using any Hasselblad. The Hasselblad cameras, like whether you're looking at like H cameras, which you can still use with phase 1 backs, that's a great combination. It's a lovely combination, but Hasselblad backs, something that I utterly hate using focus, and I've only had to use it maybe like 10 times in my career so far, and I wouldn't like to use it anymore.
It's not the best.
No,
Speaking as someone who did own a Hasselblad, I was like, not a fan. Not a fan. Capture's better.
Yeah, it really lets it down. I think they shot themselves in the foot by. I mean, I don't know what the relationship is between Phase and Hasselblad, but not supporting Hasselblad backs, I think, has definitely led to lots more people choosing Phase, because you simply can't really shoot a high-end, full-on commercial job with the requirements that agencies and clients have. The file naming, the processing, everything that goes into like having multiple screens. Like there's no viewer window on focus. You can't have another picture on a separate monitor. You have to mirror them, which I usually hate mirroring, because I think only like the Digi really needs to see the settings and the ChronoSync windows. Like I don't like for anybody else to see that. So I usually set it up so like 2 separate monitors, one monitor for a photographer, which is selectively mirrored with another monitor for the client, which are spaced apart now. And they only see the viewer, the Capture One viewer window. Nice big image. That's kind of all that you really want people to see.
Sure. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. So that's your camera.
Yes.
That you'd have on the desert island. Do you have a particular desert island photo book?
I think one of my favorite photo books is Batinsky's Manufactured Landscapes. That's one photo book that I found really interesting to look at, and it's something that I touched on my dissertation actually back in university, in terms of like environmental aspects, in terms of what effect we are having on nature and how we are changing nature and what it's becoming, and it's more and more important, you know. It's and it's incredible photo book for me personally.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, listen, as usual, obviously all of those the bits are going to be in the show notes, so people can check out the cameras, the notes, and all sorts of stuff, from the readers to the cables to the clamps, you know, syncing cameras. You know, it's all in the show notes. So thank you ever so much. Go on, Greg, you were just about to say something before I was wrapping up.
I was going to say, just I wanted to highlight, if people have been having trouble seeing the show notes in the Apple Podcast section,
we are working on it.
But it's all on the website. So go to the website, exposenegative.com, and you can see all the show notes there. And that, obviously, they've been there from day one from all the other episodes, and they are like full of links. So definitely,
and they take Greg ages to put together. So please go and click on all of them. So yeah, listen, LS, where can people find you?
So you can find me on my website, which is lsdigi.com. As well as my Instagram, which is lsdigi_ltd. So that's kind of where I'm most active at. I usually post stories, BTS stuff, rambling about cameras, tech, other stuff, and bread. I bake a lot of bread.
Yeah, I didn't even touch on this. So if there was another silver lining of COVID, you've become quite the baker.
Yes, absolutely. That was like my favorite pastime. I've baked so many sourdough loaves that I can't even count.
Yeah, I might have to.
That's
I might have
interesting
to get some
pastime for perfectionist. Like, your sourdough loaves must be something to behold.
Oh my God, Greg! They are unbelievable
to me. You may actually get one, so there we go. I'll drop one up.
Perfect,
amazing.
Look at that. Brilliant. Well, listen, LS, thank you so much for coming on. It has been an absolute pleasure, and yeah, no, you are fantastic. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, guys.
Hey guys, and thank you so much for listening to the latest episode. If you'd like to stay in touch, there are a number of options for you to reach out. We can be emailed at info@exposenegative.com, and you can find us on the website at exposenegative.com or on Instagram at xnegative. We're pretty good at responding to DMs on there, and we're also on Twitter at exposenegative. You can find us personally on our own private accounts on Instagram. Tom is tombarnes.com, and I am just Greg Fennell. Cheers. Thanks for listening.